You won't believe what happened when an HOA Karen thought she could mess with me and my tractor during harvest season, but let me tell you, watching the cops tow her car right in front of her furious face was the sweetest justice I've ever seen. Stick around to the end of this crazy story, and if you enjoy tales of instant karma and neighborhood drama, make sure you subscribe for more unbelievable stories that will leave you shaking your head and laughing at the same time. It was the middle of corn harvest season, the busiest and most exhausting time of year for me and my family, and anyone who has ever worked on a farm knows that every single hour counts, every machine matters, and every distraction can turn into a disaster, so you can imagine how furious I was when my tractor, the very heart of my operation, got slammed into by none other than the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, the HOA Karen who had been a thorn in everyone's side for years, the type of woman who printed out the HOA bylaws and waved them around like they were the 10 Commandments, yelling at kids for riding bikes too close to her driveway, demanding people paint their shutters a specific shade of beige, and acting like she personally owned every blade of grass in the subdivision, except my property wasn't even technically under her HOA's jurisdiction. I had a working farm, a family legacy of land passed down for generations, and yet that didn't stop her from sticking her nose into my business at every opportunity, calling in fake complaints about noise from my equipment, complaining that the smell of manure was unacceptable, and once even trying to report me for illegal landscaping, as if the rows of corn stretching into the horizon were just decorative bushes I planted to annoy her delicate suburban sensibilities. So when she plowed her shiny SUV right into my tractor one crisp October morning while I was working near the edge of the road, my blood pressure skyrocketed, not just because of the damage but because of the sheer gall of the situation. And it all started when I had parked the tractor for a moment to grab a thermos of coffee from the truck and check my harvest schedule, only to hear a loud crunch followed by a screech of brakes, and when I turned around, there she was, standing outside her car with her hands on her hips, screaming at me as if it were my fault, yelling things like, "You can't just block the road with this filthy farm equipment. And this is a residential area, not your personal barnyard." Even though the county road clearly ran through farmland and my tractor had reflective hazard lights flashing like they always did, making it impossible to miss unless you were too busy staring at your own reflection in the rearview mirror while speeding through an area you didn't belong in the first place, so I walked over calmly at first, trying not to explode, and said, "Karen, you just hit my tractor," pointing at the bent metal where her bumper had slammed into one of the rear tires. But instead of apologizing or showing the slightest ounce of accountability, she rolled her eyes and said, "Well, maybe if you didn't leave it sitting here like some kind of obstacle, this wouldn't have happened, and I'm going to make sure the HOA fines you for this. Mark my words," which made me laugh out loud because again, my property wasn't under her HOA, but she was so used to bullying people into submission with threats of fines and letters that she genuinely thought she had authority over me. So I told her, "Actually, you damaged my equipment, and you're going to pay for this," but she just scoffed and pulled out her phone like she was calling the police on me, which was ironic because I had already dialed 911 the moment she started yelling, and when the sheriff's deputy arrived a few minutes later, the look on her face went from smug superiority to something between panic and outrage, because instead of siding with her, the deputy took one look at the situation, saw the damage, saw my flashing hazard lights, and immediately told her she was at fault for reckless driving. And when she tried to argue, going on about how my tractor was unsightly and in violation of HOA rules, the deputy shut her down with a simple, "Ma'am, this road is county jurisdiction, and farm equipment has the right to operate here during harvest season, so you're the one in the wrong." But Karen didn't stop there. She launched into a tirade about how she paid high HOA fees to maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic, and how my farm was bringing down property values. To which I couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Lady, my farm was here before your subdivision even existed, so if you don't like the view, maybe you should move," which only made her face turn redder than a ripe tomato, and the deputy, clearly fed up, asked her for her license and registration, and that's when the real twist came. Turns out her registration was expired by several months and her insurance had lapsed, which meant not only was she at fault for the accident, but she was also driving illegally. And when the deputy told her that her vehicle was going to be towed, the meltdown that followed was something straight out of a reality TV show, with her stomping her feet, shrieking about how she was being harassed, threatening to sue me, the sheriff's office, the entire county, and maybe even the state for discrimination against homeowners, and at one point she even tried to block the tow truck with her body, arms spread wide as if she could stop the inevitable, but the tow driver just shook his head, walked around her, and hooked up the SUV anyway. And let me tell you, watching that shiny vehicle being pulled up onto the truck while she screamed bloody murder was like watching justice unfold in slow motion, the kind of scene that makes all the years of dealing with her nonsense worth it. But the story doesn't even end there, because once the tow truck left, she turned her wrath back on me, threatening to sue me personally for emotional distress, and the deputy finally told her if she didn't calm down she'd be arrested for disorderly conduct, at which point she stormed off down the road in her heels, muttering curses, while I stood there sipping my coffee, trying not to laugh out loud at the absurdity of it all. But the aftermath was even sweeter, because word spread quickly around the neighborhood, and suddenly all the people she had terrorized for years, the families she fined for having garden gnomes, the parents she scolded for letting kids play in sprinklers, the retirees she harassed about lawn heights, they all started coming up to me thanking me for standing up to her, even though technically I didn't do much besides call the cops and let karma run its course. And a few days later I heard through the grapevine that the HOA board had finally had enough of her antics and was holding a special meeting to vote her out of her self-appointed role as enforcer, which apparently passed with overwhelming support. And while I can't confirm whether she moved away or just went into hiding out of embarrassment, I do know that I never saw her SUV or her sour expression on my road again, and every time I fire up my tractor now, I remember that day not as a headache but as a victory. Proof that sometimes all you have to do is stand your ground and let people hang themselves with their own rope. And in the end, the harvest was good, the corn sold well, and I had a story I could tell for the rest of my life about the time a meddling HOA Karen tried to take on a farmer and lost everything in the span of one morning. A reminder that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are with their fake rules and loud mouth, the law and a little patience can turn the tables in the most satisfying way possible. And that's why whenever I hear the phrase, instant karma, I think back to the sight of that tow truck hauling away her car while the deputy shook his head and I just stood there smiling. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that harvest season is unpredictable, but sometimes it gives you a bumper crop of poetic justice along with the corn.